Dear students, I wish you all a very good day. We can see the topic post-colonial approach to Shakespeare's plays. The writers, the white authors, are said to be universally esteemed, and they have universalist claims, and their works have been considered superior to the works of other writers of other countries. The norms and practices they had are called Eurocentric norms and practices, and they were raised to the highest position. And the writers of other countries were expected to follow the Eurocentric norms and practices laid down by or used by the white writers of European countries. And the works of other writers were relegated to subsidiary or marginalized places. They were considered of lowest status. Post-colonial criticism started with Franz Fanon through his work The Wretched of the Earth, which was published in 1961. And his voice, the voice he expressed through this work, is called the voice of cultural resistance. The colonized people could have their own voice. They could find a voice and identity. And how did they find the voice? They wanted to reclaim their own past. The colonizers devalued the nation's past, and they did not estimate them good, and they called it the past of the colonies, was called by the European writers, by the Europeans, a pre-civilized limbo or a historical void. They found the emptiness in the past of the colonized. They did not consider anything worthy of the past of the colonized. Edward Said came out with the Orientalism. This book was published in 1978, and he brought out the Eurocentric universalism through Orientalism because it was centered by, it was occupied by, the central position was occupied by the Europeans, the European white writers, and their works have universal values and universal application or universal applicability. Whatever that is Western or European was considered superior in those days during the period of colonization and in the post-colonial period also. Said referred to Orientalism, and he could identify the East as the other, and it was considered inferior to the West in the post-colonial period. So some characteristics of post-colonial reading, post-colonial study could be seen now. And the post-colonial writers wanted to create a pre-colonial version of their own nation. They wanted to bring back the literature of their past, the pre-colonial period, the literature that was written by their ancestors, wanted to recreate the pre-colonial version of their own nation. They wanted to reject the modern and the contemporary because they considered them tainted with the stained with the colonial status of their colonizers. They wanted to extricate their work from the influence of the modern and contemporary writers. we can see some of the characteristics of post-colonial criticism. Number one was their representation of the past. And second one was their writing. So the language they chose for their writing. So in the beginning, as they were trained in colonizers' language, that is English, they wrote their works in colonizers' language. So the choice of language was the second characteristic of post-colonial criticism. The third characteristics could be seen as the awareness of their own awareness of double or hybrid identity. So now we can see what they meant by hybrid identity or double identity. So these colonizers, I'm sorry, the colonized had their university education, and it was the education of the Europeans, and they were trained in English language, and so they could identify themselves with the colonizers, and they thought like the colonizers, they wrote like the colonizers, and so and it formed one part of their identity. At the same time, they were drawn towards their native language, their native culture, and the genres used by the ancestors of their own country. So they were drawn between, they were pulled between these two kinds of identities. So that is what is called a double or hybrid identity. We can see three phases in post-colonial writing. Number one is called adopt phase. And non-European writers were expected to accept the authority of European models without any questions because they believed their works have got universal validity. And so that is what happened in the first phase. So they unquestionably accepted the European works as their models. Second one could be called adapt phase. And so here they could use European forms or European genres for the subject matter of their own countries. For example, African writers could use African subject matter, but they could choose the European forms or European genres to write about their own subject matter. And the third one is adapt phase. So here they wanted to extricate themselves from the influence of the colonizers. And so naturally they wanted to become culturally independent. And so they not only the subject matter was from their own country, but they wanted to choose a proper medium or proper form or proper genre to deal with the subject matter of their own country. So they could be free in their choice of using the form of literature as well as the subject matter of literature. So that is the third phase they went through. Now we can see some of the norms practiced by the post-colonial writers. And we can see whether post-colonial theory could be applied to Shakespeare's plays. He was a white writer. He belonged to the colonizers. The post-colonial elements like reclaiming the past of their literature, or use of their own language, or use of any other language, and dealing with the culture of their country, or suffering from double identity. All these did not occur in the case of Shakespeare because he himself was a white writer and they were the rulers of the world at that time. And but we can see still post-colonial theory could be applied to Shakespeare's plays because Shakespeare dealt with some non-white characters in his plays. And when we study the non-white characters in the plays of Shakespeare, we could see the stand taken by Shakespeare towards the other. Non-white characters are called the other. So we can start with Othello. Iago condemns Othello and he calls him a Barbary half, and Brabantio was shocked at Desdemona's elopement with Othello, and so he calls him a thing. He cannot understand how a girl like Desdemona could run away the goddess to the sooty bosom of such a thing as thou. So he calls Othello a thing. Othello is the hero of the play. He is not discriminated as the Moor, but he is duly recognized and awarded by the Duke of Venice and the soldiers in the play. And he is the noble, valiant Moor, the general, the captain, as complimented by his soldiers. And everybody venerated him, and everybody loves him. And the Duke of Venice appoints him as the governor of Cyprus. But Othello suffers, and Othello's fall is not due to his being a Moor, but to his flaw, jealousy. It is because of his personal flaw he suffers in the play, and he makes others also suffer. We can move on to the next one. Discriminatory attitude towards a person will bring out only resistance from the victim. Resistance, subversion, or opposition from the victim. Because the victim doesn't like to put up with the discriminatory practices of the so-called superior people. And Shylock shows such a kind of resistance to Antonio's treatment in The Merchant of Venice. And he has grown antagonistic and furious because of the ill treatment meted out to him by Antonio. Shylock accuses Antonio. He hath disgraced me, and hindered me 500,000, laughed at my losses, mocked at my gains, scorned my nation, thwarted my bargains, cooled my friends, heated mine enemies. And what is his reason? I am a Jew. And so we can understand the reasons for his antipathy. Shakespeare has given him enough reasons to give expression to his hatred towards Antonio. But when Shylock goes against the law of nature and humanity by plotting against the life of Antonio, Shakespeare has to curb him and save Antonio. And we can see in Titus Andronicus, Shakespeare buries Aaron the Moor alive in Titus Andronicus because he is presented as the evil incarnation. So it can be seen from his words. Vengeance is in my heart, death in my hand, blood and revenge are hammering in my head. Aaron is such a kind of personality who revels in cruelty, who enjoys cruelty. No tinge of remorse, no tinge of sadness or sorrow or regret can be seen in Aaron. He is not a human being at all. He is reduced to the level of a beast. So it also can be seen from the words of this man. But I have done 1,000 dreadful things, as willingly as one would kill a fly. And nothing grieves me haughtily indeed, but that I cannot do 10,000 more. So he regrets that he has not done 10,000 crimes. He has done only 1,000 crimes. And so from this, we can see the satanic temperament of Aaron. He deserves such a kind of punishment from the hand of Shakespeare. So from the non-white characters, we can understand Shakespeare is benevolent towards the fellow human beings. He is above all kinds of discriminations. Shakespeare loved his nation, his language, his culture, his heritage, as all the other white writers do. But he was a universalist. As he was a broad-minded person, he could go beyond the prejudices of caste, color, and creed. And he could respect human beings, he could love human beings without any discrimination. But whenever the non-white characters violated human law, he had to assert his righteousness. Otherwise, we can see Shakespeare was very loving and he proved himself superior as a writer, and he was a great man who was above all kinds of discriminations. He could love and respect human beings. And we could have any number of examples, a few more examples from his Shakespeare. Due to time constraint, I think I could stop here. And the students are advised to read other plays where we come across non-white characters, and through the analysis of those non-white characters, we can see the large-mindedness of Shakespeare and how post-colonial elements could be applied to Shakespeare's work also. Thank you. I wish you a good day.